I never thought my life would change because of a cleaning service. But that's exactly what happened on that Tuesday afternoon in late October, when my phone buzzed with an unknown number, and a woman's terrified voice shattered everything I thought I knew about my own home, my family, and myself. Let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before all of this happened to truly appreciate how much everything changed. My name is Rebecca Torres, and at 34 years old, I had built what I considered a perfect life. At least that is what I told myself every morning when I looked in the mirror, trying to recognize the exhausted woman staring back at me. I was a marketing director at a tech startup in Austin, Texas, the kind of company that expected your soul in exchange for a competitive salary and equity options that might never be worth anything. I owned a beautiful 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood called Willow Creek, the kind of place where neighbors waved at each other from across manicured lawns, and everyone pretended their lives were as perfect as their landscaping. And I had recently gotten engaged to my boyfriend of 3 years, Daniel, a software engineer with kind eyes and infinite patience who somehow loved me despite the fact that I was never around. On paper, everything looked flawless. My Instagram account was filled with pictures of Sunday brunches at trendy restaurants, engagement photos in front of the Austin skyline, and carefully staged shots of my living room that made it look like something out of a home decor magazine. What those photos did not show was the reality beneath the surface. I was drowning. The job that had once excited me now consumed every waking hour and invaded my dreams at night. I left for work before dawn, arriving at the office when the parking garage was still empty, and the security guard looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. I returned long after sunset, eating cold takeout in my car because I did not have the energy to heat it up. My weekends were spent answering emails and preparing presentations for Monday meetings that would inevitably lead to more emails and more presentations. I had not read a book for pleasure in over 2 years. I could not remember the last movie I had watched that was not playing in the background while I reviewed spreadsheets. My house, which I had purchased with such pride 2 years earlier, signing the mortgage documents with trembling hands and tears of joy in my eyes, had become nothing more than a place to sleep. And honestly, even that was generous. Most nights I collapsed on the couch still wearing my work clothes, my laptop open on my chest, waking up at 3 in the morning with a stiff neck and the blue glow of an unfinished email illuminating my face. Dust accumulated on shelves in thick gray layers. Dishes piled up in the sink until the smell forced me to deal with them. The refrigerator contained nothing but condiments and a carton of milk that had expired so long ago I was afraid to open it. I could not remember the last time I had properly cleaned the bathrooms, and there were areas of my house, like the basement and the guest room, that I had not entered in months. Daniel had suggested more than once that we hire help. He would bring it up gently, casually, as if it had just occurred to him while we were eating dinner, on the rare occasions when we ate dinner together. Daniel would say something like, "You know, my coworker uses this cleaning service, and they are really affordable. Maybe we should think about it." And I would nod and agree that it was a good idea and promise to look into it. Then I would forget about it the moment I walked out the door, my mind already racing through the tasks waiting for me at the office. I kept putting it off, telling myself I would get to it eventually. Eventually never came. That October, my mother came to visit for a weekend. She had called a few weeks before to announce her intention, and I had tried to discourage her, citing work obligations and a busy schedule. But Elena Rodriguez Torres was not a woman who accepted discouragement easily. She informed me that she had already booked her flight and would be arriving on Friday afternoon, and I could either pick her up from the airport or she would take a taxi. I picked her up from the airport. The look on her face when she walked through my front door said everything words could not. She stood in the entryway, her small suitcase still in her hand, and slowly turned in a circle, taking in the state of my home. Her expression shifted from surprise to concern to something that looked almost like grief. Mom said, "Rebecca, honey, what happened here? This place looks like nobody lives in it." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment, the way they had when I was a child, and she had caught me in some minor misbehavior. She was right, of course. The curtains were gray with dust, hanging limp and neglected from their rods. The hardwood floors that I had loved so much when I bought the house were sticky in places and dull everywhere, crying out for the polish they had not received in months. There was a strange smell coming from somewhere I could not identify, something musty and old that had become part of the background of my life. But the worst part was that I had become so accustomed to the mess that I barely noticed it anymore. Looking at my house through my mother's eyes, I saw it clearly for the first time in what felt like years, and what I saw made me want to cry. I said, "I know, Mom. Work has been crazy. I just do not have time." It sounded pathetic even to my own ears. She did not say anything right away. Instead, she walked through the house, opening doors and peering into rooms, her silence more devastating than any criticism could have been. When she finished her tour, she came back to where I was standing, frozen with shame in my own living room, and took my hand. Mom said, "Come, sit with me." She led me to my cluttered kitchen table, pushing aside a stack of unopened mail and a collection of empty water bottles that I had been meaning to recycle for weeks. We sat across from each other, and she took my hands in hers, her fingers warm and familiar against my cold skin. Mom said, "Sweetheart, you are running yourself into the ground. I can see it in your face. You have dark circles under your eyes. You have lost weight. And your home, the home you were so excited to buy, looks like it has been abandoned. What is happening to you?" I wanted to defend myself, to explain that this was just what it took to be successful, that I was building something important. But the words would not come. Instead, tears started streaming down my face, and once they started, they would not stop. I said, "I do not know, Mom. I do not know how it got this bad. Every day I tell myself I will do better. I will take care of things. I will find balance. But then I wake up and there is another emergency at work, another deadline, another meeting that cannot be rescheduled. And everything else just keeps slipping away." She reached across the table and wiped my tears with her thumbs, the way she had when I was a little girl. Mom said, "Sweetheart, you need help. There is no shame in hiring someone to clean. You cannot do everything yourself, and you should not have to. You are one person, not a machine. And even machines break down when they are not properly maintained." I said, "I know, I keep meaning to look into it." Mom said, "Not meaning to, doing. This weekend, we are going to find you a cleaning service, and you are going to let them help you. Promise me." I promised. Those words stayed with me long after she left on Sunday afternoon. I stood in my doorway waving as her taxi pulled away, and then I turned around and looked at my house, really looked at it, with fresh eyes. The mess, the dust, the neglect. It was a physical manifestation of how badly I had been treating myself. That night, I made a decision. I was going to change. By Monday morning, I was scrolling through cleaning service apps on my phone during my commute, the train rocking gently beneath me as I compared prices and read reviews. I found one called Sparkle Clean that had excellent reviews and reasonable prices, with a user-friendly interface that made booking almost too easy. I scheduled an appointment for the following Tuesday, selecting a 4-hour deep cleaning package that promised to transform my home. The app assigned me a cleaner named Mariela Gutierrez. Her profile picture showed a smiling woman in her late 40s with warm brown eyes and laugh lines around her mouth. She had a 5-star rating and over 200 completed jobs, with reviews that praised her thoroughness, her reliability, and her attention to detail. I felt a small weight lift off my shoulders. Finally, I was doing something about the chaos. I sent Mariela the entry code for my front door through the app's secure messaging system and went about my week, barely giving the appointment another thought. I had too many other things to worry about. Too many fires to put out, too many urgent matters demanding my immediate attention. Tuesday arrived the way every day arrived, in a blur of alarms and coffee and emails that needed answers before I even got to the office. I was in the middle of a conference call about quarterly projections, the third such call of the week, when my phone started buzzing insistently on my desk. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I ignored it, focusing on the charts displayed on my computer screen and the droning voice of my company's CFO, explaining why our numbers were down. The phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. And again. By the fourth call, a creeping sense of unease started working its way up my spine. Nobody called that persistently unless something was wrong. I muted myself on the conference call, held up a finger to my colleague across the table to indicate I would be right back, and stepped into the hallway. I answered the call. I said, "Hello?" What I heard made my blood run cold. A woman's voice, shaking so violently that I could barely understand her words, came through the speaker. Mariela said, "Please, you have to help me. There is someone hiding in your house. I saw them in the basement. Please, you have to call the police." In the background, I heard what sounded like a door slamming, then footsteps, then a sound that might have been sobbing. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I said, "Wait, slow down. What do you mean someone is hiding?" "Where are you right now?" Mariela said. "I am in the bathroom upstairs, the one at the end of the hall. I locked the door. I was cleaning the basement like you asked, and I saw someone move behind the water heater. A person. They were just sitting there in the dark, watching me. When I screamed, they ran deeper into the basement. I think they went into that little room with the door, the one in the back corner. Please, Mrs. Torres, I am so scared. I do not know what to do. My mind was racing, trying to process what she was telling me. The little room she was describing had to be the storage area off the main basement, a cramped space about 8 feet by 10 feet, filled with old boxes and holiday decorations and things I had inherited from my grandmother. It had a heavy wooden door that I kept closed because the space always felt oddly cold and uncomfortable, like the air itself did not want to be there. I had not been inside that room in at least 6 months. Who could possibly be hiding there? I said, "Stay where you are. Do not open that bathroom door for anyone, no matter what you hear. I am calling the police right now, and I am on my way home. 20 minutes. Can you stay there for 20 minutes? Mariella said, yes, I will stay. But please hurry. I can hear something moving downstairs. Please hurry. I hung up and immediately dialed 911, my fingers trembling so badly that I had to try twice before I got the number right. As I sprinted to my car, nearly knocking over a colleague in the hallway and ignoring his startled question, I explained the situation to the dispatcher in short, breathless sentences. The dispatcher said, "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Officers are being dispatched to your address right now. Can you confirm the address for me?" I confirmed it while fumbling with my car keys, dropping them once, twice, before finally managing to unlock the door and throw myself behind the wheel. The dispatcher said, "And the person who found the intruder, she is currently locked in an upstairs bathroom?" I said, "Yes. The bathroom at the end of the upstairs hall. She said she can hear someone moving downstairs. Please, you have to hurry." The dispatcher said, "Officers are en route. They should arrive within 5 minutes. I'm going to stay on the line with you. Are you driving to the location now?" I said, "Yes. I'm about 15 minutes away. Maybe 10 if I hurry." I broke every speed limit on my way home, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white and my fingers ached. The dispatcher stayed on the line, asking me periodic questions in a calm, measured voice that I found simultaneously reassuring and infuriating. How could she be so calm when there was someone hiding in my house, when Mariella was trapped in a bathroom, terrified? The entire drive, my mind spiraled through possibilities, each one more frightening than the last. Who could be hiding in my basement? Was it a burglar who had somehow gotten in and decided to wait until the house was empty? A homeless person seeking shelter from the October chill? Someone more dangerous? Someone with intentions I did not want to imagine? I thought about all the nights I had come home late, exhausted, barely conscious. All the times I had unlocked the front door and walked straight to the couch without checking the other rooms. All the nights I had fallen asleep with the windows unlocked, with the back door unbolted, too tired to care about security protocols. I had been so careless, so reckless, so focused on work that I had neglected the most basic aspects of my own safety. And there was the basement, that dark, cold space that I avoided whenever possible. The old cellar door in the back corner of the yard that led down to a separate entrance, a door I had forgotten even existed because the previous owners had told me it was sealed shut, and I had never bothered to check. When I pulled onto my street, tires squealing as I took the corner too fast, I saw 2 police cruisers already parked in my driveway, their lights flashing red and blue against the afternoon sun. Officers were standing on my front porch, and one of them was speaking into his radio while another disappeared through my front door. I jumped out of my car before it had fully stopped, nearly falling in my haste, and ran toward them. I said, "I am the homeowner, Rebecca Torres. What is happening? Is she okay? Is the cleaning lady okay?" One of the officers, a tall woman with short blonde hair and a calm demeanor that suggested she had seen far worse than whatever was happening in my house, approached me with one hand raised. Officer Chen said, "Ma'am, please stay back for now. We have officers inside securing the premises. The cleaning woman is safe. She is still upstairs in the bathroom, but we need to complete our sweep before anyone else enters the house." I said, "What did you find? Is there someone in there?" Officer Chen said, "We are still determining that. Please wait here. I will update you as soon as I have more information." I stood there on my own front lawn, heart pounding, watching strangers move through my home with flashlights and drawn weapons. Neighbors had started to emerge from their houses, standing on their porches and in their driveways, watching the spectacle with the poorly concealed curiosity of people whose lives were about to become significantly more interesting. I saw Mrs. Henderson from across the street, the retired school teacher who had brought me cookies when I first moved in, standing at the end of her driveway with her phone in her hand, probably already composing the text message she would send to the neighborhood watch group. It felt surreal, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. This could not be happening. Not to me, not in my quiet suburban neighborhood, not in the house I had worked so hard to buy. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, Officer Chen returned. Her expression was impossible to read. Officer Chen said, "Ma'am, you need to come inside. We found something in your basement. You are going to want to see this." My legs felt like they were made of lead as I followed her through my front door, past the living room that looked so different with police officers standing in it, down the hallway to the basement stairs. The door to the basement was open, and I could see lights moving below, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, more officers were clustered around the open door of the storage room. One of them was taking photographs with a professional-looking camera. Another was on the phone, speaking in low tones. A third was writing something in a notebook. Officer Chen said, "Watch your step. The floor is uneven down here." I stepped closer, my heart hammering so hard that I could hear it in my ears, and what I saw made me gasp. The storage room had been transformed. The boxes I remembered, the ones filled with Christmas ornaments and old photo albums and things I had been meaning to sort through for years, were pushed against the walls in neat stacks. And in the center of the small space was a makeshift living area. There was a sleeping bag spread out on the concrete floor, a decent one, the kind you might take camping. Next to it was a small pile of clothing, neatly folded despite obvious wear, and beside that, a collection of empty water bottles and food wrappers, granola bars and crackers and things that did not require cooking. A battery-powered lantern sat on top of one of the boxes, and next to it was a stack of well-worn paperback books, their spines cracked and pages yellow with age. But it was the photograph that caught my attention. A worn photograph in a cheap plastic frame, placed carefully next to the sleeping bag like a treasured possession. And it was the person sitting in handcuffs in the corner that made me stop breathing entirely. She was young, maybe 18 or 19, with matted brown hair that looked like it had not been washed in weeks, and hollow cheeks that spoke of hunger and hardship. Her clothes were dirty, but not ragged, jeans and a hoodie that had seen better days, but were not the rags of someone who had been living on the streets for long. And she was staring at me with enormous, terrified eyes that were the exact same shade of brown as my own. I said, Who are you?" She did not answer. She just kept staring at me, her lips pressed tightly together, her entire body tense as if she were preparing to run or fight, even though there was nowhere to go and no way to escape. One of the officers, a younger man with a kind face, stepped forward. Officer Martinez said, "She had no identification on her, will not give us her name, but she has not been aggressive, just scared. We found her hiding behind the water heater when we first entered, and she came out peacefully when we asked her to." I could not stop looking at her eyes. There was something about them, something familiar, something that tugged at a memory I could not quite access. I said, "How long has she been here?" Officer Martinez said, "Based on the evidence, we estimate at least 2 to 3 weeks. There is a significant accumulation of food wrappers and personal items. 3 weeks. This girl had been living in my basement for 3 weeks, and I had not noticed. I had been so wrapped up in my own problems, so focused on work, that I had failed to realize there was another human being living under the same roof." I looked at the photograph beside the sleeping bag. From where I stood, I could not quite make out the details. I moved closer, and Officer Chen moved to stop me. Officer Chen said, "Ma'am, this is a crime scene. You should not touch anything." I said, "Please, just let me see the photograph. I will not touch it. I just need to see it." After a moment of hesitation, she nodded and carefully picked it up with gloved hands, holding it so I could see. My heart stopped. The photograph showed a woman I recognized immediately. It was my mother, perhaps 30 years younger, with the same dark hair and warm smile I had known my entire life. She was holding a baby in her arms, a tiny infant wrapped in a pink blanket. She was standing in front of a house I did not recognize, a small white house with blue shutters and a garden full of flowers, smiling at the camera with that warm smile I knew so well. Written on the bottom in faded ink, in handwriting that was unmistakably my mother's, were the words, "Elena and Sophia, 1987. The room started spinning. I grabbed onto a nearby shelf to steady myself, sending a box of old magazines tumbling to the floor with a crash that made everyone jump. I said, "Where did you get this?" For the first time, the girl spoke. Her voice was rough, like she had not used it in a long time, like she had forgotten how to form words. The girl said, It was the only thing she left me. My mother, before she died. My mouth went dry. My thoughts raced so fast I could not catch any single one of them. I said, "What was your mother's name?" The girl looked at me with those eyes, my eyes that I saw every morning in the mirror, and said, "Elena Gutierrez. She died 6 months ago. She told me before she died that I had a sister, that my sister lived in Austin. She made me promise to find her. I do not remember falling, but suddenly I was on the concrete floor, and Officer Martinez was kneeling beside me, asking if I was okay. I was not okay. I was as far from okay as I had ever been in my entire life. The next few hours were a blur of police interviews, social workers, and phone calls that I made with trembling hands. The girl, whose name was Sophia, was not arrested. She had not stolen anything, had not damaged any property. She had simply been living in my basement for what the police estimated was about 3 weeks, sneaking in through the old cellar door that connected to the back of my property, the one I had been told was sealed shut, the one I had never bothered to check. She had found the house through public records, tracking down my address through a series of internet searches and visits to government offices. She had watched the house for several days before finding the courage to enter, observing my patterns, noting when I left and when I returned. She had discovered that the old cellar door was not sealed at all, just stuck, and with a little effort, she had been able to force it open. I called my mother. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold the phone. She did not answer the first time, or the second. On the third try, she picked up. Mom said, "Rebecca, is everything all right?" "You never call during work hours." I said, "Mom, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you have another daughter?" The silence that followed told me everything. It stretched on for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard my mother's breath catch, heard what might have been a sob. Mom said, "How did you find out?" I said, "She is sitting in my living room right now. She has been living in my basement for 3 weeks. She came here to find me." My mother broke down crying. Through her sobs, the truth finally emerged, a truth she had kept hidden for almost 4 decades. Before my parents met, before my mother became the respectable woman I had known my entire life, she had been in a relationship with a man named Carlos Gutierrez. She was only 19, barely out of high school, working as a waitress in a small town in New Mexico while saving money for college. When she found out she was pregnant, Carlos panicked. He was young too, with no money and no prospects, and the weight of potential fatherhood was more than he could bear. He disappeared one night without a word, leaving nothing behind but a note that said he was sorry. My mother's parents were strict and religious, the kind of people who went to church every Sunday and believed that appearances were everything. When they found out their unmarried daughter was pregnant, they were horrified. They could not bear the scandal, could not imagine what the neighbors would say. So they sent her away, far from anyone who knew them, to live with an aunt in Albuquerque until the baby was born. Mom said, "I was so young, Rebecca. I was so scared. I had no money, no education, no way to support a child. My parents told me it was for the best. They told me the baby would have a better life with someone who could provide for her. They found Carlos's sister, a woman named Maria, who had been trying to have children for years without success. She and her husband agreed to adopt the baby." I said, "And you just gave her away?" Mom said, "It was not that simple. Nothing about it was simple. I held her for 2 hours before they took her. 2 hours. And then they placed her in Maria's arms, and I walked out of that hospital, and I told myself I would never think about it again. I said, 'But you did think about it.' Mom said, every single day of my life. When I had you, when I held you for the first time, all I could think about was Sophia. All I could think about was how I had held her the same way, had looked into her eyes the same way, and then I had let her go. The guilt never went away. It just became something I learned to live with, like a scar that never fully heals." I said, "Why did you never tell me?" Mom said, "Because I was ashamed. Because I thought you would think less of me. Because every year that passed made it harder to find the words. And because I was a coward, Rebecca. I was a coward who took the easy way out and kept taking it for the rest of my life." I looked through the doorway at Sophia, who was sitting on my couch wrapped in a blanket that a social worker had given her, drinking tea and staring at the wall with empty eyes. She was watching me, watching the phone pressed to my ear, watching the tears streaming down my face. I said, "Well, she is here now. She found us. What do we do?" Mom said, "I am getting on the first flight to Austin. I will be there by morning. Do not let her leave, Rebecca. Please, do not let my daughter leave again." I hung up and walked over to Sophia. I sat down beside her on the couch, keeping a respectful distance, aware that she was still a stranger to me despite the blood we shared. I took a deep breath and tried to find words for a situation that had no script. I said, "So, you are my sister." Sophia said, "Half-sister." "Technically." I said, "How did you find me?" Sophia's story came out slowly, in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle she was assembling as she spoke. She stared at the floor as she talked, her voice flat and emotionless, as if she were recounting events that had happened to someone else. Sophia said, "My mom, the woman who raised me, she got sick 2 years ago. Cancer. It started in her lungs and spread everywhere. She fought it for a long time, longer than the doctors expected, but in the end, it won. She always won, the cancer. She always wins." She paused, and I saw her throat move as she swallowed hard. Sophia said, "Before she died, she told me the truth about where I came from. She said she had always meant to tell me, always planned to, but there was never a right time. And then there was no time left. She gave me that photograph and a name, Elena Rodriguez. That was your mother's maiden name. She said Elena was young and scared, but that she had loved me, that she had cried when she handed me over, that she had made Maria promise to give me a good life." I said, "And did she? Give you a good life?" Sophia said, "Yes. Maria was a good mother. She loved me like I was her own blood. She worked 2 jobs to put me through school, to give me opportunities she never had. I was going to be the first person in our family to go to college. I got into the University of New Mexico on a scholarship. I was going to study nursing." I said, "What happened?" Sophia said, "Maria got sick. The bills started piling up. I had to drop out to take care of her, to work full-time to pay for her medications. The scholarship was gone. The apartment was gone. After she died, I had nothing. No family, no money, no home. The only thing I had was that photograph and a promise I made to a dying woman. I said, 'The promise to find your sister.' Sophia said, 'The promise to find my family.' I said, 'Why did you not just knock on my door? Why hide in the basement for 3 weeks?' Sophia finally looked at me, and I saw the fear in her eyes, the vulnerability she had been trying so hard to hide. Sophia said, 'I was going to. That was the plan. I came here 3 weeks ago. I found the old cellar door and went inside to look around, just to see if this was really the right place, to confirm that I had found the right Rebecca Torres. But then you came home, and I panicked. I hid behind the water heater, and you did not come down to the basement. You just walked around upstairs for a while, and then you left again.' I said, 'I was probably going to work, or coming back from work. Those are the only 2 things I do these days.' Sophia said, 'I realized how tired I was, how hungry. I told myself I would just stay one night. Just one night to rest, to gather my courage, to figure out what to say. But one night became 2, became a week. I was too scared to show myself. Scared you would call the police. Scared you would reject me. Scared you would look at me with disgust and tell me I was not your family, that I had no right to be there. I said, 'I would not have rejected you.' Sophia said, 'You do not know that. You do not know me. I am a stranger who broke into your house and lived in your basement like some kind of animal. Why would you want anything to do with me?' I said, 'Because you are my sister, and family does not turn its back on family.' It was a statement I meant with my whole heart, even though I had no idea how to make it true. The next few days were overwhelming in ways I could never have anticipated. My mother arrived the following morning on a red-eye flight from Phoenix, where she had been living since my father died 3 years earlier. She showed up at my door looking like she had not slept in days, her eyes red from crying, her hands trembling as she reached for the doorbell. The reunion between her and Sophia was one of the most emotional things I have ever witnessed. Sophia stood in my living room, stiff and uncertain, while my mother approached her slowly, as if approaching a wild animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. Mom said, "Sophia, my Sophia." Sophia said, "I do not know if I can call you Mom. Maria was my mom." Mom said, I know, sweetheart. I am not asking you to call me anything. I am just so grateful, so incredibly grateful that you are here, that you found us, that you did not give up." They stood there for a long moment, neither one moving, and then something shifted. Sophia's shoulders relaxed slightly, and my mother opened her arms, and they came together in an embrace that seemed to last forever. There were tears, accusations, apologies. There were raised voices and long silences. There were moments when I thought everything was going to fall apart, and moments when I thought we might actually make it through. Daniel came over that first night, and I had to explain everything to him. He sat on my couch, the same couch where Sophia had sat wrapped in a blanket just hours before, and listened as I told him the impossible story of how I had discovered a sister I never knew existed living in my own basement. He took it better than I expected, which is to say he did not run screaming from the house. Daniel said, "So what happens now?" I said, "I do not know, but I am not going to abandon her. She is family." Daniel reached over and took my hand. Daniel said, "Then neither will I." Sophia stayed in my guest room, the room I had not entered in months, the room that Mariella had cleaned and aired out before everything went crazy. We filed paperwork with social services, confirmed her identity through DNA testing that came back with the results we already knew in our hearts, and began the long process of getting her back on her feet. She had been a straight-A student before her adoptive mother's illness had forced her to drop out of college. She was smart, resilient, and had a quiet strength that I came to admire deeply as the days turned into weeks. She had survived things that would have broken most people, and she had done it alone, without support, without family, without anyone to catch her when she fell. But having a stranger in my home, even a stranger who was my sister, was not easy. There were awkward silences at breakfast, long stretches of time when neither of us knew what to say. There were misunderstandings over small things, like how I liked my coffee and what time I expected dinner, and whether it was okay to use the washing machine after 10 at night. There were moments when Sophia would withdraw into herself for hours, closing the door to her room and refusing to come out, and I would not know what to say or do. I would stand in the hallway, my hand raised to knock, and then lower it again, afraid of making things worse. And there were times, if I am being completely honest, when I resented the disruption to my carefully constructed life. Times when I came home exhausted from work and just wanted to collapse on the couch alone, but there was someone else there, someone who needed things from me, someone whose presence demanded acknowledgement and attention. Then I would feel guilty for the resentment. How could I resent someone who had been through so much? How could I begrudge her the small amount of space she took up in my life when she had lost everything? One night, about 2 weeks after Sophia had moved in, I came home to find her sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. The lights were off, the television was off, and she was just sitting there in the gray twilight, her hands folded in her lap. I said, "Hey, you okay?" Sophia did not look at me. Sophia said, "I do not belong here." I said, "What do you mean?" Sophia said, "Look at this place. Look at your life. You have everything. A career, a house, a fiancé who looks at you like you hung the moon. And me? I have nothing. I am nothing. A college dropout with no job and no prospects, living off the charity of a stranger. I do not know why I thought I could just show up and suddenly have a family. That is not how it works. That is not how anything works." I sat down across from her, close enough to reach out and touch her if she needed it, far enough to give her space. I said, "You are right. That is not how it works. Family is not something you just suddenly have. It is not a light switch you can flip on and off. It is something you build. It takes time and effort and a lot of awkward dinners where nobody knows what to say. But Sophia, I want to build that with you. I want to know you. I want you to know me. Can you give us that chance? Can you give me that chance?" Sophia was quiet for a long time. I could see her face in the dim light, could see the struggle playing out across her features. Sophia said, "I do not know how to be a sister." I said, "Neither do I. I have never had one before. We will figure it out together." It was not an immediate transformation. There was no magical moment when everything suddenly clicked into place, when we looked at each other and felt the bond of blood and knew we were family. Real life does not work that way. Real life is messy and complicated and full of small moments that add up to something bigger over time. But slowly, day by day, we started to know each other. I learned that Sophia loved to read, especially science fiction and fantasy novels about other worlds and impossible adventures. Her favorite author was a woman named Ursula Le Guin, and she had read all of her books multiple times, the pages worn soft from handling. I learned that she had a talent for cooking that put my microwave meals to shame. She would take the random ingredients in my mostly empty refrigerator and somehow transform them into meals that tasted like they had come from a restaurant. When I asked her where she had learned, she told me that Maria had taught her, that cooking together had been their special time, their way of connecting after long days of work and school. I learned that she was terrified of spiders, genuinely terrified, in a way that made her jump and squeal like a little kid. But she could kill a cockroach with her bare hand without flinching, squashing it with a paper towel and tossing it in the trash without missing a beat. I learned that she had a dry sense of humor that would catch me off guard and make me laugh at the strangest moments. She would say something deadpan, something that sounded completely serious, and I would be halfway through responding before I realized she was joking. Then I would start laughing, and she would start laughing, and for a moment, it would feel like we had known each other forever. Sophia learned about me too. She learned that I was a workaholic who used busyness as a way to avoid dealing with my emotions. She learned that I was terrified of failure, which was why I never took risks, never tried anything new, never stepped outside the narrow path I had set for myself. She learned that I had spent my entire life trying to be perfect because I was afraid that if I showed any weakness, any flaw, people would leave me. My father had left when I was 12, walked out one morning and never came back, and some part of me had always believed it was because I was not good enough, not perfect enough, not worth staying for. One evening, about a month after Sophia had moved in, we were cooking dinner together in my kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry that Sophia was orchestrating like a conductor leading an orchestra. She handed me a carrot and a knife and told me to slice it thin, and I did my best, though my slices were uneven and clumsy compared to her precise cuts. Sophia said, "Why do you work so much?" I said, "Because that is what you have to do to succeed." Sophia said, "No, I mean really. Why? You have more than enough money. You hate your job. Every time you talk about work, you look like you are describing a prison sentence. So why do you keep doing it?" I did not have an answer. I had never asked myself that question. Not really. Work was just what I did. It was who I was. It was the thing that gave my life structure and meaning and purpose. Without it, who would I be? That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the house settling around me, thinking about my life. When had I stopped enjoying things? When had success become more important than happiness? When had I become someone who dreaded each morning instead of looking forward to it? I thought about my childhood, about the pressure my parents had put on me to excel. Good grades were expected. Second place was unacceptable. Every report card, every test, every competition was an opportunity to prove my worth or fail to measure up. I thought about how I had internalized that pressure until it became my entire identity. I was not Rebecca, the person. I was Rebecca, the achiever. Rebecca, the success. Rebecca, the one who never makes mistakes. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. My boss sounded so shocked that I almost laughed. I spent the day sitting in my backyard with Sophia, drinking coffee and talking about nothing important. The weather, the birds, a funny thing she had read in a book, a memory from childhood that made us both smile. It felt like a revelation. It felt like waking up from a long sleep. Over the following weeks, I started making changes. Small ones at first, then bigger. I set boundaries at work, telling my team that I would not be available after 7 in the evening or on weekends except for genuine emergencies. I left the office at a reasonable hour, even when there were still emails in my inbox and tasks on my to-do list. I took weekends off. Actually off. Not just physically away from the office, but mentally present in my own life. My boss was not happy. There were pointed comments about dedication and commitment and what it takes to succeed in this industry. There were subtle threats about promotions and opportunities and the direction of my career, and I found that I did not care as much as I thought I would. The world did not end when I stopped being available 24/7. The company did not collapse without my constant attention. Projects got done, deadlines were met, problems were solved, all without my round-the-clock involvement. And in the space that opened up, I discovered something I had lost a long time ago. I discovered myself. I started remembering who I was before I became consumed by work. I remembered that I used to love painting, that I had taken art classes in college and dreamed of being a real artist someday. I remembered that I used to write poetry, filling notebooks with verses about love and loss, and the way light fell through windows in the late afternoon. I remembered that I used to have hobbies and interests that had nothing to do with productivity or success, or proving my worth to the world. I bought some canvases and paints from an art supply store near my office. At first, everything I made was terrible. Muddy colors, clumsy brushstrokes, compositions that looked nothing like the images in my head. But Sophia encouraged me to keep going. Sophia said, "It does not matter if it is good. It matters that you are doing it. It matters that you are creating something, expressing something, being something other than a machine that makes money." So I kept painting. And slowly, I started to improve. Not because I was naturally talented or because I worked harder than anyone else, but simply because I kept showing up, kept trying, kept allowing myself to fail and learn and grow. It was not about being good. It was about the joy of creating something with my own hands, of expressing myself in a way that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or presentations or quarterly projections. For the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living my life instead of just surviving it. Mariella, the cleaning lady who had discovered Sophia, became an unexpected part of our story. I called her the day after the incident to apologize for what she had been through and to explain what had happened. She was understandably shaken, but when she heard the full story, her fear turned to fascination. Mariella said, "So she was just looking for her family? That is so sad, and so beautiful. I cannot believe I found her. I almost did not clean the basement, you know. I thought maybe you would not want me to. It looked like you had not been down there in a while. But something told me to go down there. Something made me check." I said, "I am glad you did. I am glad you found her." Mariella said, "Me too, even though I almost had a heart attack. My husband, he could not stop laughing when I told him. He said only I could find a secret person while cleaning someone's house." I said, "Would you be willing to come back? I understand if you never want to set foot in my house again." "I would not blame you, but I wanted to offer." Mariella said, "Are you kidding? I have to know how this story ends. I will be there next Tuesday, same time as always." She became a regular fixture in our lives after that. Every Tuesday she would come to clean, and every Tuesday she would ask for updates on Sophia's progress. How was she doing? Had she found a job yet? Was she getting along with her sister and her biological mother? She and Sophia became unlikely friends, bonding over their shared heritage and their love of telenovelas, the dramatic Spanish soap operas that played on the Spanish language channels. Sometimes I would come home from work to find them sitting on the couch together, a cleaning rag forgotten in Mariella's hand, shouting at the television as some character made a terrible romantic decision. Mariella would say, "No, do not go back to him. He is no good. Your mother was right about him." And Sophia would say, "But she loves him. Love is blind." And they would both throw their hands in the air in exasperation while I stood in the doorway, smiling at the scene before me. 3 months after Sophia had moved in, my mother came to visit again. This time, the three of us sat down for a real conversation about the past, about the secrets and the silences, and the years that had been lost. Mom said, "I have spent so many years carrying this guilt. It was like a stone I wore around my neck, weighing me down, making everything harder. When I gave you up, Sophia, I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself you would be better off with Maria, that she could give you things I could not, that I was making a sacrifice for your benefit. But the truth is, I was scared. I was young and scared, and I took the easy way out. I am so sorry. I am so sorry I was not brave enough to fight for you." Sophia was quiet for a moment, looking at my mother with an expression I could not quite read. Sophia said, "I used to be so angry at you. For years, I imagined meeting you and telling you how much you had ruined my life. I imagined screaming at you, making you feel all the pain I felt growing up, knowing I was not wanted." Mom flinched, and I saw tears start to gather in her eyes. Sophia said, "But then I actually went through it, actually struggled, actually had to make impossible choices with no good options. I dropped out of school to take care of Maria. I gave up my dreams because she needed me. And I realized that life is complicated. People are complicated. You did the best you could with what you had. I do not know if I would have done any better in your position." Mom said, "That does not make it right." Sophia said, "No, but it makes it understandable. And I think understanding is the first step toward forgiveness." They hugged then, really hugged, holding each other tightly while I watched with tears streaming down my own face. It was not perfect. It would never be perfect. But it was real, and it was honest, and it was a beginning. That Thanksgiving was the first one we celebrated as a complete family. My mother, Sophia, Daniel, and me gathered around my dining room table for a meal that Sophia had insisted on cooking entirely by herself. She spent 2 days preparing, filling my kitchen with smells that made my mouth water every time I walked past. There was turkey, of course, golden and perfectly roasted. There was stuffing made from a recipe that Maria had taught her, with chorizo and cornbread and spices I could not identify. There were 3 kinds of pie because Sophia could not decide which one was her favorite. It was the best Thanksgiving dinner I had ever had. As we went around the table saying what we were thankful for, a tradition my mother had started when I was young, I looked at the faces of the people I loved and felt something I had not felt in a long time: peace. I said, "I am thankful for unexpected blessings, for the things we do not plan for, the people we do not expect. I am thankful that sometimes life surprises us in the best possible ways, Sophia said. I am thankful for second chances, for the opportunity to start over, to build something new from the broken pieces of the past. And I am thankful for sisters who do not call the police when they find you living in their basement. Everyone laughed. Mom said, I am thankful for forgiveness. And for daughters who are braver than their mother ever was. Daniel said, I am thankful for this family, all of you, even if this is the craziest story I have ever been part of. And trust me, working in tech, I have heard some crazy stories. We laughed again, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. But life, as I was learning, was not about perfection. It was about showing up, day after day, even when things were hard, even when you did not know what you were doing, even when you were scared and uncertain and felt completely out of your depth, and things were about to get hard again. A few weeks after Thanksgiving, Sophia came to me with a confession. She knocked on my bedroom door late one evening, her face pale and nervous, her hands twisting together in front of her. Sophia said, I need to tell you something. I said, okay, come in, sit down. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking like she was about to deliver terrible news. Sophia said, I have been applying for jobs, secretly, for the past month. I said, that is great. That is not something you need to confess. That is something to celebrate. Sophia said, I got an offer, a good one. Maybe the best offer I could have hoped for. I said, Sophia, that is wonderful. Why do you look so upset? Sophia said, because it is in Seattle. My heart sank. Seattle. Thousands of miles away, across the country. I said, Seattle? Sophia said, it is a tech company. Entry-level marketing position. They liked my portfolio, the one I put together with your help. They are offering to pay for me to finish my degree while I work, to sponsor me through an online program. It is exactly what I have been dreaming of, exactly what I thought I would never have again after Maria died. I said, that is amazing. Congratulations. Sophia said, you do not look happy. I said, I am happy for you. I do not know. I finally have a sister, and now she is leaving. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Sophia said, I am not leaving you. I am just going to be farther away. That does not mean we stop being sisters. That does not mean we stop being family. We have phones and video calls and airplanes. I will come back for every holiday. You can visit me whenever you want. I said, I know. I know all of that is true. It just hurts, that is all. It is allowed to hurt. Sophia said, I know. It hurts me too. But I cannot pass this up. This is my chance to build a real life, to prove to myself that I am more than the things that happened to me. I have to take it. I said, of course you do. I would never ask you not to. I just need a minute to be sad about it. She came over and hugged me, and we sat there together for a long time. Two sisters who had found each other against impossible odds, now facing the reality that family does not always mean living under the same roof. The next few weeks were bittersweet. We helped Sophia pack, filling boxes with clothes and books and the few possessions she had accumulated during her time with me. I found her an apartment in Seattle through a colleague of mine who lived there, a small one-bedroom in a safe neighborhood near the office where she would be working. We made plans for regular video calls, scheduled for every Sunday evening, and blocked out dates for holiday visits months in advance. On the day she left, I drove her to the airport and walked her to the security checkpoint. We stood there in the crowded terminal, surrounded by strangers rushing to their flights, holding on to each other like we might never let go. I said, call me when you land. Sophia said, I will. I said, and do not forget to eat. You always forget to eat when you are stressed. Set reminders on your phone if you have to. Sophia said, I know. I said, and Sophia said, Rebecca, I am going to be okay. You taught me that. You showed me that I can be okay, that even when everything falls apart, there is a way to put it back together. I would not be doing this if it were not for you. We hugged one last time. Sophia said, thank you, for everything, for not calling the police, for letting me stay, for giving me a chance when you had no reason to. I said, thank you for being brave enough to find me, for not giving up, for hiding in my basement until a very thorough cleaning lady stumbled upon you. We both laughed through our tears. She walked through security, turned to wave one last time, and then she was gone. I cried the entire drive home, big, ugly sobs that made it hard to see the road. I had to pull over twice to wipe my eyes and blow my nose and convince myself that I was okay to keep driving. But in the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling empty, I felt full, full of gratitude for the time we had shared, full of hope for the future we were building, even if we were building it from different cities, full of love that distance could not diminish. Sophia called every Sunday, just like we planned. We video chatted for hours, our conversations ranging from the mundane details of our daily lives to the big questions about love and meaning and what we wanted from the future. When she got her first promotion, 3 months into her new job, I was the first person she told. She called me at 6 in the morning my time, forgetting about the time difference, too excited to wait. Sophia said, "Rebecca, I got promoted, already. They said I am the fastest learner they have ever had. They said I remind them of someone who is going places." I said, "Of course you are. I knew you would be. I am so proud of you." When I finally quit my toxic job to start my own marketing consulting firm, a decision that terrified me and thrilled me in equal measure, Sophia was my biggest cheerleader. She helped me design my website, proofread my marketing materials, and talked me down from panic attacks at 3 in the morning when I was convinced I had made the worst mistake of my life. Sophia said, "You are going to be amazing. You are already amazing. You just need to believe it the way I believe it." And when Daniel and I got married the following June, Sophia was my maid of honor. The wedding was small but beautiful. We held it in my backyard, which had become a lush garden under Sophia's influence during her time living with me. She had planted flowers and vegetables and herbs, transforming the neglected space into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. My mother walked me down the aisle, tears streaming down her face, her arm tight around mine. Sophia stood beside me as I said my vows, wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, our mother's eyes, my eyes. Mariella was there too, sitting in the front row with her husband and 2 children, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and loudly blowing her nose at all the emotional moments. During the reception, Sophia gave a speech that made everyone cry. Sophia said, "When I was hiding in Rebecca's basement, I thought I had hit rock bottom. I had lost my mother, lost my home, lost everything and everyone I loved. I was alone in the dark, literally and figuratively, with nothing but a photograph and a promise to a dying woman. I thought my life was over. I thought I would never feel hope or happiness or love ever again." She paused, collecting herself. Sophia said, "But then a cleaning lady found me, and everything changed." Everyone laughed. Sophia said, "What I learned from this experience is that family is not about blood. It is not about genetics or history or obligation. Family is about choice. It is about showing up for each other, even when it is hard. It is about forgiveness and second chances and unconditional love. Rebecca, you did not have to accept me. You did not have to open your home and your heart to a stranger who had been secretly living in your basement for 3 weeks. By all rights, you should have called the police and pressed charges and never thought about me again." She turned to look at me, and I saw tears sparkling in her eyes. Sophia said, "But you did not. You chose me. You chose to be my sister. And in doing so, you taught me what it means to be family. You taught me that love is not something you earn or deserve. It is something you give and receive, freely and generously, without keeping score." She raised her glass. Sophia said, "To Rebecca and Daniel, may your marriage be filled with as many surprises and unexpected blessings as the one that brought us together. I love you, sister." I stood up and hugged her, and for a moment it was just the 2 of us, 2 halves of a whole that had been separated for decades, but had finally found its way back together. A year after the wedding, I received a call from Mariella. It was late on a Tuesday evening, and I was sitting on the couch with Daniel, watching a movie we had been meaning to see for months. When I saw her name on my phone, I smiled and answered. I said, "Mariella, is everything okay?" But she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Mariella said, "Rebecca, I do not know what to do. My daughter, my Lucia, she is sick. The doctors say she needs surgery, a serious surgery, but we do not have insurance. My husband's job, they cut his hours, and we lost the insurance. The bills, they are so much. We have been calling hospitals and charities and everyone we can think of, but nobody can help us in time. I do not know how we are going to pay. I do not know what we are going to do." My heart broke hearing the fear in her voice. I thought about how Mariella had been there at the beginning of this whole journey, how she had discovered Sophia, how she had come back week after week, not just to clean, but to be part of our story, how she had become, in her own way, family. And I thought about how this was my chance to pay it forward. I said, "How much do you need?" When she told me the amount, I did not hesitate. I said, "I will send it tomorrow." Mariella said, "Rebecca, no, I cannot accept this. It is too much. We will find another way. I just called to ask if you knew any charities, any programs that might help. I was not asking for money." I said, "I know you were not, but I am offering anyway. You are family, Mariella, and family takes care of each other." She cried even harder. Lucia had her surgery 2 weeks later. It was successful. She recovered fully and was back in school within a month, annoying her younger brothers and complaining about homework like any healthy teenager should. Mariella insisted on paying me back over time, and I let her because I knew it was important to her pride. She would send extra payments when she could, along with homemade tamales that were the best I had ever tasted, and heartfelt thank you notes written in her careful handwriting. 2 years after Sophia moved to Seattle, she called me with news that made me scream so loud that Daniel came running in from the other room, convinced that something terrible had happened. Sophia said, "I got accepted. Full scholarship. I am going to law school." I said, "Sophia, that is incredible. Oh my God, I am so proud of you. Law school." Daniel stood in the doorway, watching me jump up and down like a child, a confused smile on his face. Daniel said, "Good news. I take it?" I said, "She got into law school. Full scholarship. My sister is going to be a lawyer." Daniel's face broke into a genuine grin. Daniel said, "Tell her congratulations from me, and tell her she owes me free legal advice for the rest of my life." Sophia laughed on the other end of the phone. Sophia said, "I could not have done it without you, Rebecca. Without any of this. When I was living in that basement, hiding in the dark, I never imagined my life could turn out like this. I was ready to give up. I had given up. But you gave me hope. You gave me a reason to keep going." I said, "You did the work. All I did was open a door." Sophia said, "Sometimes that is all someone needs. Someone to open a door." As I hung up the phone and sat down with Daniel to process the news, I thought about how much had changed since that Tuesday afternoon when Mariella had called me, terrified, to tell me there was someone hiding in my house. I had been so lost back then, even if I did not know it. I was drowning in work, disconnected from myself and the people I loved, going through the motions of a life that looked perfect on the outside, but felt hollow on the inside. Finding Sophia had forced me to slow down, to reevaluate, to remember what really mattered. And in saving her, I had saved myself. 3 years later, I was sitting in the audience at Sophia's law school graduation when I felt my phone buzz. It was a text from my mother. Mom said, "I am so proud of both my girls. Watching you two together heals something in me that has been broken for a very long time. Thank you for being brave enough to let her in. Thank you for teaching me that it is never too late to fix the mistakes of the past." I looked at Sophia walking across the stage to receive her diploma, radiant in her cap and gown, smiling so wide it looked like her face might split in two. And I thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. The choices, the chances, the million small decisions that had brought us here. If I had not been too busy to clean my own house, I never would have hired Mariella. If Mariella had not been thorough enough to check the basement, she never would have found Sophia. If Sophia had not been brave enough to stay, to take the risk of being discovered, we might never have known each other. Life is funny that way. The things we think are problems often turn out to be blessings in disguise. The disruptions to our carefully planned lives are sometimes exactly what we need to wake up and start really living. After the graduation ceremony, Sophia found me in the crowd and threw her arms around me. Sophia said, "We did it." I said, "You did it. I just watched and cried." Sophia said, "No, we did it. Together. None of this would have happened without you." I said, "And none of it would have happened without a very thorough cleaning lady." We both laughed. Sophia said, "I have something to tell you." I said, "Another surprise? I do not know if my heart can take any more surprises." Sophia said, "This one is a good one, I promise." I said, "Okay, hit me." Sophia said, "I got a job offer, a really good one. Maybe the best one yet." I said, "Another one? You are collecting them like baseball cards." Sophia said, "This one is different. It is in Austin." It took a moment for the words to sink in. I said, "Austin? You are coming back? You are coming home?" Sophia said, "A nonprofit legal organization that helps immigrants with their cases. Pro bono work for people who cannot afford lawyers. People like Maria was when she first came to this country. It does not pay as much as the corporate offers I got, but it is exactly what I went to law school to do. It is exactly what I dreamed about when I was hiding in your basement, trying to imagine a future where I mattered." I hugged her so tightly that she complained she could not breathe. I said. Welcome home, sister. Sophia moved back to Austin a month later. She rented an apartment not far from my house, close enough that we could have dinner together several times a week, but far enough that we both had our own space. On her first night back, we sat on my porch with glasses of wine, watching the sun set over the backyard, the garden she had planted years ago now in full bloom. Sophia said, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I said, "All the time." Sophia said, "What if I had never come to Austin? What if I had given up before I found you? What if I had just stayed in New Mexico and let myself fade away?" I said, "Then we would have missed out on all of this, on everything." Sophia said, "And what about you? What if you had just called the police and had me arrested? What if you had been too scared or too angry to give me a chance?" I said, "Then I would have missed out on the best sister anyone could ask for. And I would have kept working myself to death at a job I hated, never knowing that there was more to life than spreadsheets and deadlines." Sophia said, "You are such a sap." I said, "You love it." Sophia said, "I really do." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors change in the sky as the sun dipped below the horizon. Sophia said, "You know what I realized the other day?" I said, "What?" Sophia said, "I spent so many years feeling like I did not belong anywhere, like I was this puzzle piece that did not fit any picture. Even with Maria, who loved me completely, I always felt like I was missing something, like there was a hole inside me that I could not fill. But now, sitting here with you, I finally feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be." I said, "That is because you are. You always were. It just took us a while to find each other." A few months later, I got an email that made me laugh out loud. It was from the Sparkle Clean app, asking if I would like to leave a review for Mariela Gutierrez. I sat down at my computer and wrote, 5 stars. Mariela is the most thorough cleaner I have ever hired. She found something in my basement that I never knew was there, and it changed my life forever. Would recommend to anyone who wants a really deep clean. I showed it to Sophia, who burst out laughing so hard she snorted. Sophia said, "You cannot post that. People are going to think she found a dead body or something. They are going to call the police on you." I said, "Why not? It is completely true." Sophia said, "Fine, but when the detectives show up, I am telling them it was all your idea." I posted the review anyway. A week later, Mariela called me, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Mariela said, "Rebecca, I am getting so many new clients. They all want to know what you found in your basement. They are calling my phone, sending me messages, asking if I will come check their basements too. What should I tell them?" I said, "Tell them you found something priceless. Something worth more than any amount of money." Mariela said, "And if they ask what it was?" I said, "Tell them it was family." Today, as I write this, it has been 5 years since that fateful Tuesday, when Mariela called me in a panic. 5 years since I discovered a sister I never knew existed hiding in my basement. 5 years since my life changed in ways I never could have predicted. Sophia is now a successful immigration lawyer, running the nonprofit she started working for and expanding it to serve more families every year. She recently won a landmark case that made national news, establishing an important precedent for asylum seekers. I keep a framed article about it on my office wall, right next to the first painting I made that I actually liked. Daniel and I have 2 children now. A girl named Elena after my mother, a strong-willed 3-year-old who already has her grandmother wrapped around her little finger, and a boy named Carlos after Sophia's biological father, a 1-year-old with his father's kind eyes and his aunt's mischievous smile. Sophia is their godmother, and she takes the role very seriously. Every weekend she can manage it. She takes them on adventures around Austin, to the park and the zoo and the children's museum, and anywhere else that seems like fun. She is creating the kind of memories with them that will last a lifetime, the kind of memories that Maria created with her. My mother moved to Austin last year, unable to stay away from her grandchildren and her 2 daughters. She lives in a small apartment 10 minutes from my house, close enough for daily visits, but far enough for everyone to have their own space. She and Sophia have built a beautiful relationship, one founded on honesty and forgiveness rather than secrets and shame. Mariela still cleans my house every Tuesday. She has expanded her business and now employs a dozen other cleaners, training them personally to meet her exacting standards. She sends me updates on Lucia, who is now a healthy, happy teenager with straight A's and dreams of becoming a doctor. She wants to help people the way the doctors helped her, she says. She wants to give back. And me? I am finally the person I always wanted to be. Not perfect, not successful by some external measure, but happy. present. Alive in a way I had forgotten was possible. I run my own consulting business now, with clients I choose and hours I set. I paint on the weekends and write poetry in the mornings before the kids wake up. I have hobbies and interests and friendships that have nothing to do with work or productivity or proving my worth to the world. Sometimes I go down to my basement and stand in the little storage room where Sophia used to hide. It has been transformed now, turned into a cozy reading nook with comfortable chairs and warm lighting and shelves full of books. But I can still picture her there in my mind, huddled in the dark, scared and hopeful and brave. I think about all the people in the world who are hiding, literally or figuratively. People who are afraid to show themselves, afraid to ask for help, afraid to reach out and connect. People who think they are not worthy of love or family or belonging. People who have given up hope. And I think about how all it takes sometimes is for someone to find them, to see them, to open a door and say, "You are welcome here. You are wanted here. You are family." That is what Mariela did for Sophia. That is what Sophia did for me. And now it is what I try to do every day, in small ways and large. Last month, something happened that brought everything full circle in a way I never could have anticipated. I was at the grocery store, pushing my cart through the produce section. Elena perched in the child seat and Carlos strapped to my chest in a baby carrier. It was a normal Tuesday afternoon, the kind of unremarkable moment that makes up most of a life. I was comparing avocados, trying to find ones that were ripe but not too ripe, when I heard a voice behind me. A woman said, "Excuse me, I am so sorry to bother you, but are you Rebecca Torres?" I turned around to find a young woman, maybe 22 or 23, with tired eyes and a nervous expression. She was holding a piece of paper in her hands, crumpled from being folded and unfolded too many times. I said, "Yes, that is me. Do I know you?" The woman said, "No, but I read about you. About your sister. About how she was living in your basement and you took her in instead of having her arrested. I found an article about it online." I remembered then that a local newspaper had done a story about us a few years ago, a feel-good piece about family reunification and second chances. Sophia had been hesitant about the publicity, but she had agreed to it in the end, hoping that our story might help someone else. I said, "Oh, yes, that was a few years ago." "How can I help you?" The woman started crying. Right there in the produce section, surrounded by strangers with their shopping carts, she broke down into sobs that shook her entire body. She said, "I am sorry. I am so sorry. I have been carrying this around for weeks, trying to work up the courage to find you. My name is Jessica. I think I am your cousin." My heart started pounding the way it had that day Mariela called me from the bathroom. I said, "My cousin?" Jessica said, "My grandmother was Maria Gutierrez, Sophia's mother, the woman who adopted her, which means we are family. At least I think we are. I do not know how any of this works." I looked at this young woman standing before me, tears streaming down her face, hope and fear warring in her expression, and I saw echoes of Sophia in her, echoes of myself, echoes of all the lost and searching people who just want somewhere to belong. I said, "Let me call my sister." 2 hours later, Sophia and I were sitting in a coffee shop with Jessica, listening to her story unfold. Jessica was Maria's granddaughter, through Maria's biological nephew, Carlos Jr., the son of Sophia's biological father. It was complicated, the way family histories often are, a tangle of blood and adoption and chance that connected us all in ways we had never imagined. Jessica's father, Carlos Jr., had cut ties with the family years ago after some dispute that Jessica did not fully understand. She had grown up knowing nothing about her extended family, nothing about Sophia or Maria or any of the rest of it. But after her father died last year, she had found old letters in his belongings, letters from Maria, letters that mentioned Sophia and the adoption and a baby given away. Jessica said, "I started researching. I found out about Sophia, and then I found the article about you two. And I knew I had to find you. I had to know if there was family out there for me. I have been so alone since my father died. I do not have anyone." Sophia reached across the table and took Jessica's hand. Sophia said, "You have us now." And just like that, our family grew again. Jessica comes over for dinner every Sunday now. She and Sophia have become close, bonded by their shared connection to Maria and by the experience of losing the parent who raised them. She adores Elena and Carlos, bringing them toys and books and spending hours on the floor playing with them while the adults talk. Sometimes, watching the three of them together, I think about how unlikely all of this is, how a single moment, A single phone call from a terrified cleaning lady set in motion a chain of events that would reshape my entire understanding of what family means. If I had hired a different cleaning service, if Mariella had skipped the basement that day, if Sophia had lost her nerve and left before being discovered, if I had reacted with fear instead of compassion, any of those tiny changes would have led to a completely different present. A present where I never knew I had a sister, where Jessica remained alone, where we all continued on our separate paths, never knowing what we were missing. But that is not what happened. What happened was exactly what was supposed to happen, even though none of us could have planned it or predicted it or even imagined it. That is the thing about life that I have come to understand in these 5 years. We spend so much time trying to control everything, trying to plan and prepare and protect ourselves from the unexpected. But the unexpected is where all the good stuff lives. The unexpected is where we find the people and experiences and moments that transform us. The key is not to prevent the unexpected. The key is to be open to it when it arrives. My children are growing up in a house full of love and laughter and family who chose each other. Elena already knows that her Aunt Sophia came to live with us in a very unusual way, though we have not told her the full story yet. Someday, when she is old enough, we will tell her everything. We will tell her about the basement and the photograph, and the cleaning lady who screamed. And we will tell her that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely places. Carlos, still too young to understand any of it, simply knows that he is surrounded by people who adore him. He reaches for Sophia with chubby arms whenever she walks into the room. He falls asleep in my mother's lap while she hums the lullabies she used to sing to me. He giggles when Mariella makes funny faces at him during her Tuesday visits. He will grow up knowing that family is not just the people you are born to. Family is the people who show up. Family is the people who stay. Family is the people who choose you again and again, even when choosing is hard. Last week, Daniel and I were lying in bed after the kids had finally fallen asleep, exhausted in the way all parents of young children are exhausted. The house was quiet for the first time in hours, and we were just lying there, holding hands, staring at the ceiling. Daniel said, "Do you ever think about what our life would look like if none of this had happened?" "If you had never found Sophia," I said. "Sometimes, but not as much as I used to." Daniel said, "What do you think it would look like?" I said, "Emptier, lonelier. I would probably still be working 80 hours a week, trying to prove something to someone. You would have gotten tired of never seeing me and left. I would have ended up alone in this big house, surrounded by expensive things that meant nothing." Daniel said, "You really think I would have left?" I said, "I think I was not giving you much of a reason to stay." He squeezed my hand. Daniel said, "I am glad she found you." I said, "Me too. I am glad you stayed." Daniel said, "I am glad we built this life together. All of us. Even the parts that do not make any sense." I laughed. I said, "Especially the parts that do not make any sense. Because that is what family is, really. It is the parts that do not make sense. It is the unexpected connections and the unlikely bonds and the strange twists of fate that bring people together. It is the cleaning ladies who find sisters in basements. It is the strangers who become daughters. It is the cousins who appear out of nowhere and become family. It is all the beautiful, messy, complicated ways that human beings find each other and hold on. So that is my story. The story of how I hired a cleaning lady, and she called me freaking out because there was someone hiding in my house. The story of how I rushed home to find a sister I never knew I had. The story of how that one impossible moment changed everything. If you are out there and you are feeling alone, I want you to know something. I want you to know that your family might still be out there, waiting for you to find them. They might not be where you expect them to be. They might not look like what you imagined. They might be hiding in a basement, scared and hopeful and brave, waiting for someone to open the door. Do not give up on finding them. Do not give up on being found, because that is what family does. We find each other, we choose each other, and we never, ever let go.